All right, watercolor class, we have, this is part 2 of our lizard piece, and we've already done the washes in the background. It's kind of a blurred background. We've already put in our wet into wet washes on him as well. And now we're starting to do more of our detail work. And we're going to, just to make everything look like it goes together, I'm going to really water down these dark bluish grays that we used in the background as the shadow parts that are going to be, should use a larger brush, that are going to be the scales and everything. So if you have a pipette or something like that, you can just drip some water on there. You just want, you know, quite a bit, because these are very, very light details. And what I'm talking about is the little shapes around the background around each one of the scales. So like kind of like the skin underneath the actual scale. And we're going to be shading it a little bit darker here. We're also going to be darkening around the eye. So let's get started. You're just following the pattern that you see on your reference photo. And everybody should have this in your email. If your parents can't find them, make sure they check the spam folder. A couple of people found theirs in the spam folder, just FYI. Okay, we are going to need our fine liner brush, so it's very small, in order to do these tiny little drawings. And we're just going to put on really pale washes. Now remember, watercolor dries lighter. You do want it kind of wet, but you don't want it to be so drippy. See how drippy that is? I can literally just go in and take that out. Or it will take a very long time for it to dry. So you just kind of want to put in these scales that are on your lizard. It's a really pale kind of a scale area. These get smaller and smaller as they come towards the front. You don't have to do every single one. It's going to take a little time. Take your time. Do it well. As they come over here, you can pretty much just see the side of the scale. I'm just kind of laying down the pattern that I see in the back. When this completely dries, you can always go back in and add in a little bit more of a wash to darken it. This area right here is very dark. See if I can find some that's not. That was very watery, so I'm just going to put in the dark here. I'm going to clean out my brush, but it's still damp, and I'm going to soften the edges around this. It kind of comes out a little ways. A lot of softening on this piece. This is definitely dark. Drop in a little bit more dark right in the center. And the back leg there, but the stomach is darker. I'm actually going to switch to a little bit larger brush. This is just glazing. You're putting a dry surface with wet paint, and you're just kind of glazing over what's already there. Watercolor being transparent, you're going to have quite a bit of the colors showing through. I'm just mixing up my ultramarine blue along with my burnt sienna, or excuse me, my umber, in order to get me this blackish color. That's very watered. We need stronger color, less water. And there is a shadow right in here along the bottom half. Just follow the shadow patterns that you see on your reference photo. And then you're going to soften your edges. Sorry, I live close to the Air Force Base, so you're going to hear a lot of airplanes coming around. There is also a deep shadow on the bottom half of this arm here in the front. So that's the leaf contrasting shadow up onto the arm. The light's being blocked, and we're going to soften that edge so that you can get really nice and dark there. The arm on the other side is also darkened in here. Yellow on that top side, it's dark on the bottom side. So back to my smaller brush, put these darks in and soften edges. before we do any details in the feet and everything, we need to get the leaf that this guy is sitting on in. So let's just go ahead and do that. And we're going to want to do a wet into wet. So we're going to go right up along our outline. You want it wet, but you don't want it runny, drippy kind of thing. I'm going to go up close to that wet space, but not actually get into that. Got into this foot a little bit. So I'm going to create a dam by drying the foot. Whoops. Pushed onto the table. Okay. Go very carefully around your feet. You have to work pretty quickly, or this part over here is already starting to dry. All right, we're going to go into our bright green, same color as the guy, so he's hidden well and camouflaged. This is your sap green. And we're just going to drop that in. It should be a lot lighter than the background. And that's why we put that little yellow edge at the very beginning. So that it would show a difference between the background and the leaf that he's on. It's so much the same color. But I'm going to put in some striations here in a second. And of course the feet are going to be much darker. The little toes are almost black. So kind of fill in that area so it doesn't have a lot of back and forth. And you can see it's starting to puddle here. There isn't any reason you can't move your board around and let the color move into whatever space you want it to go into. But you can also come back and just drop in darker color around some of the lighter areas, you know, and just kind of add a little bit more color in there. It's still wet. You can still add right up next to that black. And this little part of the leaf, and then this little part of the leaf behind the foot, I am going to do that separate at a separate time, just so I don't have to worry about too much water. And there's even a little space between this toe and this toe that we'll do with a smaller brush and you know, while we're doing the details and stuff. Okay, I'm going to mix up some sap green and viridian green, and I'm probably going to put in a little bit of the ultramarine blue, so that gives me kind of a tealish color. not sure if you can see this, but I used sap green, Viridian, and a little bit of ultramarine to get this teal color. And while this is still wet, in order for me to be able to, you know, kind of control and give direction to the leaf, we're going to add in these striations on the leaf. They're very pale in the picture. And remember, watercolor dries lighter, and the green isn't dry. And so this bluish color is going to dry into the green color as well. So it's going to be lighter than it looks right now. So we're going to add in some of these little striations in order to finish off the leaf. Looks kind of like a watermelon. And you can come back in and add any highlights later, like if you wanted to add some yellow or whatever. Any of these little plumes that happen, my brush is wet, but it's not, I'm going to show you that again, because I know I've shown you guys this in the past. You're going to dry most of the brush off like this, right? So it gets most of the water off, and you can just softly pick up without disturbing too much. Now there's a whole lot of water right there. So I'm just going to blend that through and kind of take away some of the fuzziness of those striations and stuff. So we're just going to leave that. There's some really neat shadows and whatnot that go on top and within the feet and all. And we can jump over and do, while we have these colors out, this part of the leaf that's on the other side of the foot. Same colors. It is a little bit out of focus. And so you don't have to put the striations in this one, you know, unless you just want to. And anywhere there's yellow, it's going to be brighter green. And anywhere there's white, it's going to be a lighter color. So just know that because watercolors are transparent. So let's get us some green mixed up. So when it dries, this green over here is going to be lighter than the green over the yellow. The green that's over the yellow will be brighter. And I'm not so worried about the line there because I'm going to go back in and soften that at the very end. So it kind of looks like it's fading into the background. This particular leaf is going into the darker parts of the background. So if your line is not absolutely perfect through there, don't worry about it. Oops, I picked up some darker color. Let's go lift that out. And if you did want to put, you know, like a striation or two, you know, just make them really thin and make sure they kind of match where the other striations are in the direction and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we have our leaf on. We have our body shadows. We have a few of these. Now I did those first just because I wanted to show you how light the watercolor dries. So we're definitely going to need to make our scales, that particular color, a little darker. But I do want to put in this one other shadow right in here first. So I'm going to put that in. Blend it out. I'm creating, by jig-jagging up into this space here, I'm creating an edge of those scales. Putting a little bit darker in the middle. And then softening edges. So you don't want these hard lines to be here. So we're just softening that out. A little shadow there next to the shoulder. You just glaze as many times as you need to in order to darken areas and do different techniques that you want to do. Okay, we're going to go back to our super light gray color. And the tiny little bitty scales that are up underneath his mouth, they're so small. And they're just going to kind of be a curve like this. And you don't have to have them be very very dark at all. That would help if I push this over where y'all can see it better, maybe. I don't know. And you're just going to make these little V marks pretty much all over your little guy here. I'm going to do a second coat over some of these that I did first off, just to set them off a little bit better. Now these that are in this lighter area, and you can actually go back and put a second wash of yellow because it is pretty yellow through there. So feel free to do that. And you're going to lighten that dark color up quite a bit because they're just tiny, tiny little bitty scales, itty bitties. Now, I'm not counting these scales. I'm not expecting you to. Some of these just kind of look like a line. So if you just see the line from the shadow, then that's all you put in. Those kind of look like dots. They're very pale. I'm going to add just a touch of water to that color. So I don't want it to be too watery. And there's actually some black scales there. And of course the nostril is black. It looks like we started to put that in last time, but I'm going to actually put in some of these black scales that come off of his face. And then I'm going to do a little bit of shading around each layer of the eye so that it can come in and be a little more like each section is protruding a little bit more. And you're not going to go all the way around with those because you only see the shadow in a couple of places. I need that definitely darker. I'm actually going to pick up a little bit of green. This was a green we used in the background. Just happened to have it here on the palette. It's kind of this dirty green. It's got a little this dark into the green. And I'm going to put some little texture around that eye. When I added the shadow, it kind of got lost. So we want to make sure it's there. Because it's not a line as much as it is a textured line. So I'm just following those lines, dot, dot, dot. And then back to the really watered. And let's just kind of finish off his face. These are just some of the little V shapes that are a bunch of them, but they're just barely there. There is a kind of a sienna color towards the tip. So I'm going to go into this orangey color with my gray. And it's right in here. And there's a little bit of that same color going around the nostril. So we're just going to kind of put that color in. Hope I'm not casting too much of a shadow that y'all can see. And I'm going around the little nostril. I'm darkening that up a little bit because it's, you can barely see it. Watercolor dries lighter, so there is a little bit of this color around this hole as well. And then it goes yellow. I think I made this yellow. Which I haven't wet yet, so the outer parts of it are more yellow. I'm just gonna put a little bit more yellow in the face, which I was kind of wanting to do anyway, so definitely right here. These little lines that I've made are already dry, so you can still see through the yellow into that space. And there's a little bit of yellow along the bottom mouth as well. It looks like we had some, but it just kind of dried lighter. Just keep building up your colors. Some of the background got into our guy a little bit, so I'm softening that edge. And you're just going to keep working down all of these little scales everywhere that you see them. It is going to take you a while. Don't try to rush through this and just end up with a very large scales. These are really light, really, make sure that they look like they're layered on top of each other. Just a whole bunch of little V's all over. They do get a little larger, especially where they're stretched around the stomach. You know, kind of look at that. It looks like this kind of a shape. Instead of just the bottom V, it's going to be the whole piece. So I'm just going to keep doing this. You keep doing it as well. If you need to speed up during this time, you can. They're much smaller and much lighter on the leg. The top part, and then they're going to get a little bit larger as they come down. Some of these were pretty dark right here and are in the light. And so I'm just going to soften those out a little bit. You could literally take your large brush and just kind of wash over them. I'll just do a soft wash. And some of my yellow was lost, so I'm going to come back and put a little bit of yellow in there. Now this is the arm on the other side, and it some of the green came into the back. So I'm going to take a flat brush or a filbert brush and just kind of work that green back out of the space that I don't want it in. Just pushing it back. Y'all all know how we do that. And I'm sorry my hand's going to come in front, but I need to push the green into this little space. So I'm just going to push that green in. If it doesn't work, you know, you can always just add the green. But you definitely want the green out of the yellow arm. So this is the yellowed arm on this side. And there is a little bit of green right next to this shadowy area. And then just soften that out. And there are no visible scales on that part. In the dark areas, you definitely have to have darker paint. If you just use the same color you used out here, it won't show up. Now each one of the scales along the back kind of look dinosaurish, have a shadow side to each one. So you're going to come in and put in a, you know, kind of a shadowy, just make it look more, makes it look more spiky. Just make these little triangular shapes on the back side of each of those spikes. And we can go into the background and make it a little bit darker and fade it out too. So, I messed up the pattern, so I'm just going to take it out and let that dry and come back to it. So I'm going to go on down the tail. They are very, very pale along this back, so it's pretty watered down. That orange color that we had earlier, there is some at the top of the leg here, along the back of the leg. And down on this side. Kind of browns up a little bit the leg area, and that is this kind of brownish gold color, same type colors that we used in the spikes on the back. So we're going to put a little bit more of that in there all the way around. Separate the leg from the body, softening your edges. The highlights on the back half of the tail are actually kind of yellow. The light's picking up the top of the scales there. And that's these little yellow parts right back in here. I'm going to see how that dries. I may need to blend it out. So going into a dark area, make sure you darken up your paint. That's thicker paint, less water. A little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of the umber. Make me up a little bit thicker black in order to make these tiny little dots in the dark part back here. Needs to be pretty thick paint. Coming up into here, well, you can barely see them, so it doesn't need to be very dark. Just need to be about the same color that is in the shadow area itself. And these start going down. And they're larger. The bottom of his belly is got dark scales that come down and make the bottom of him not smooth. So just kind of put in some little scales that stick down below the line there that you've drawn, and then we're just gonna blend that shadowy part up. Just so he looks bumpy along the bottom. Doesn't have to be quite as bumpy as that is, but you can just follow the pattern that you see. And when you're done with all this, if the patterning is overwhelming the picture to where people are looking more at the pattern than, you know, say at the lizard itself, you can always do a light wash over all of this, which I'm going to do in a minute after these dry. It'll kind of tone down this pattern. And I'm probably going to start about in here and wash a green over it, because I think this area is too light and this area is too light compared to the picture. And it should be I'm going to go with a yellow green. I'm going to take the sap green. I'm actually going to add yellow to it, and I'm going to do a wash over the entire lizard's body, just to kind of tone down the chevron pattern that's going on there. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the orange that we used last week to mix up the brown for the eye. And this is just your orange, right? And we're going to use some of this. Actually, I'm going to make it thicker. Ultramarine blue, a little bit of the brown. Oh, that's a lot of brown. A little more ultramarine blue. And we're going to get our dark kind of indigo color. Oh, too much water. And we're going to add that to the brown. See, the orange. That made it too brown. Actually, you know what? That's not going to be too bad. We're going to mix up some more of that. I added a little red, so now I need to add a little yellow to go back to orange color. And I'm mixing me up a warm brown. Now, if you happen to have burnt sienna, just go for it. Just use that. And you'll notice on his feet, those are very dark brown color. And so you can mix up a little bit more of that dark indigo in there. And this is going to be his claw. And his foot going in. And it's not actually going to be dark enough on that claw. So I'm going to pick up some of the indigo color, and I'm going to tap it in that wet space. Get that claw darker. And we're going to blend out some of this brown into the green. And then the foot is actually green. So we're going to soften those edges, blending in that brown into the green area. And then there's kind of the blue color we've been using along the bottom on the foot. Here. And picking up this sepia brown color. Comes up into here. A little bit of shading on the back of the foot. Let's go back and kind of soften out your edges and keep building up your feet. This is really dark on the bottom side. And then it goes that brown color on the top. We're going to thin that out a little bit. And we're going to add our shadow color all along the bottom. Hit each foot or each toe. And this was the parts of the leaf I was talking about earlier. My toes are wet, so I don't want to go in and do those right at this point. But you definitely need to make those the green of the leaf. Just building up those dark shadows along the foot. I'm going to turn this sideways, sorry. So much easier to pull than it is to push a color. Got that a little watery, but that'll work. It's some really long claws. And we got to get those shadows in. Around the feet, back side of the leg here. Along the bottom. And before we can ever put in the shadow, the cast shadow of the foot on the leaf, then we need to get those green parts in. But I can show you those pretty quickly. Just softening these edges. You always want your undercolor to be on first, and then put your shadow on top of the undercolor, no matter what color it is. Let's get that green up to that line. Softening your edges. And we're going to mix up a really thick, nice big black. I'm just going to mix it over here. Now the shadow of the foot on the leaf, it comes in about right here. It follows the thickness of these little curves of the leaf itself. And then this one comes out right at the bottom. There we go. And then it just kind of fades over. Doesn't really go all the way to the tip. You can extend the line with just a damp brush, the line that you drew. And then the other, this toe's cast shadow is right in here. So that's literally going to go from the tip point back to the, this actual knuckle goes behind this one. Oh, darn. Okay, so let's try that again. So we're going to go from this point to up underneath this point here, and then this one comes back as well. So that you have those cast shadows, and this one you don't see a cast shadow. So that means that tip has got to go behind this toe. And we're going to put a little bit of this brown on the foot to separate it from that green color of the leaf itself. And blend it up into the foot. And then you can see those tiny little bitty scales going down the leg. running out of color. Pick some more up and get those in. All of these that are on here are just kind of curved. Can't really see too much. It's out of focus. So this leg is a little bit damp, but I think it'll work. So I'm going to mix me up a whole bunch of this yellow, golden yellow, with a whole bunch of this sap green. So y'all can see how bright this green's going to be, because he's pretty bright. And to kind of tone down some of the brightness in the lizard's body. I mean, some of the pattern part of him, we're just going to add another layer of green. Just pretty much right over everything. Once it's dry, all those lines are there, right? So you don't have to worry about them being too... I'm actually going to put some down this leg too. And I'm going to have to soften a little bit along this edge, or you can just lightly wet that whole part. I think it needs a little yellow. And some of these, especially up at the top. Give me some little yellowish color. Spikes. I don't know what to call them. Kind of scalish looking. Some of these in the back I'm going to put a little more green into as they go down the back. Yeah, that better. Any of the areas, once this dries, any of the areas, like if you still think some of them are too dark or whatever, just lift them out. Once it dries, all you have to do is just kind of rub your flat or filbert brush over some of those that were too dark, and it will take those. It'll take those out. I have a little bit of this green left in here. I'm gonna go ahead and let this color blend in with his face here. Yeah, I like that. And put a little bit up here too. It's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up his feet. Put in the, there are no cast shadows on this foot because this foot goes behind a little line. I drew it in right there and you can see the, he's kind of putting a dent into the leaf. And so there's not a cast shadow like there is on this foot. And if you wanted to let this completely dry and drop some black next to the spikes, because it's pretty dark into those, you can. So other than that, we're just about finished. Let's see, need the brown. This is the foot for this arm, and then there's only this one claw coming up for the forearm, for this arm here. So we're going to put that claw in. Kind of let it attach to the hand there. Pick up some of that green we had. That is sap green. And this is the front hand. Blend that right into the brown. So there is a little bit of the leaf around this that I'll need to make dark green as well. And this line. I don't know why that line's there, but it is. Can't put my hand in the... So we're going to put the claw on the back hand in. It's only 2 claws showing. A little bit lighter color brown. This one comes in front of that one. And this arm goes up in front. So we need to go back to our green. I put a little bit of Viridian into this green because it's too bright for the leaf. Whoops. Lift that off. There is another cast shadow, and my arm is very curved through here, but you'll notice it's very angular. So I need to fix the arm, and then I'm going to cast a shadow of the body on the leaf as well, because he's lifted up from the leaf, so he's casting a shadow just like my hand would cast a shadow on there. So we're going to square out this elbow. Sorry, this whole lizard is a little bit wet, so I'm going to turn the paper. I hope y'all can still see. Give him much more of a, whoops, squared off shoulder there. Remember all of the techniques we've used all year. Anything you need to fix, just do it as you're working, and it will it'll help with the process of making everything look just the way you want it. Okay. Now from this elbow, you can see that it goes medium, lighter, and then darker, and it's definitely darker up underneath his, where the stomach is touching the leaf there. So we're going to get our super dark color. This is our ultramarine blue with our burnt umber. And we're going to come along one of these little lines here. And that's going to be where the body touches the, or is really close to the leaf. So we're going to darken that in pretty good. And then it gets thinner as it comes out to another striation here. And then I'm going to clean off a lot of my brush because it's lighter shadow coming from these arms to this one. So this is the little striations of the leaf. And I think this light is light enough, but I don't think the darks are dark enough. So I'm going to pick up some more of the color, a little more intense, which means hardly any water, and a lot of pigment. So it's dense. And I'm going to put more of it in here. Just giving that texture, dotting the body, around the body. And then right in here, it's a little bit darker again. Clean out my brush, but it's still wet. And I'm going to soften edges. And we're going to do the same thing to the shadow itself. So instead of having this hard line right here, now I've cleaned out my brush at this point. So it's just going to be clean water, and I'm touching the top line just to fuzz out that line a little bit. Because you don't want it too dark. And I'm actually thinking I might want to put it a little bit darker than it is, because it does dry lighter. Then we're also going to soften the bottom side. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this lizard. Let's try to do something different that we haven't done. And scales are definitely something we have not done. And try to create some interesting projects for you guys to do. Just keep working on your guy here until you're happy with him. And I hope you enjoy this project. I do think these little toes need to be a little darker. because they dried lighter. Stay up on point when you're doing these little details. This shadowy side goes all the way down this foot. So keep looking over at your reference photo, see what you see, fix anything you want. I've got this hard line going on right in here. I could just barely touch my brush to it with clean water, obviously, right? And get rid of that. I can always darken up my background a little bit. I do want to I take a little bit larger filbert, and I'll turn him upside down because he's still kind of wet. You can see it's kind of bubbled a little bit. But I want to soften this line of this leaf and just kind of let it kind of fall into the background. Now I've got it wet, but it's not, obviously it's not drippy. I've taken most of the color off, and I'm just going to push a little bit of this background color over the edge of that leaf and blend them together. Okay. I don't know where that little hair is, but it's obviously stuck in that brush. Go into my clean water. And I'm going to do it from both sides, just so I can pick up where those two colors overlapped each other. It created a darker tone. And what you see me doing as I lift off, I need to clean off the color that came onto the brush there. So I'm just wiping it off. When you do that, you may end up having to go back in and get a little bit more water, but you're going to get the water off, 90% of it. Now, anything that you want to change on this is still changeable, guys. So if you want your background darker, let this completely dry, re-wet it, and drop in even darker colors. However you want to work with your piece, this is your piece. So don't give up. Keep going. Anything can be fixed. Remember that. So make sure you sign with your little brush somewhere in the bottom right, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, guys.